Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is, well, it looks very much like my cat if she had none of her little white patches on her and her little mittens. But anyway, this is jasmine green tea from Upton Tea, which is one of my favorite types of green tea. It's always pleasant and refreshing and energetic. So I thought that would be nice. It's still creeping toward the end of my drinking hot tea in non-air conditioned rooms, but we've had a little bit of a respite in having what you would call mild weather. It's not actually summer yet, so that's good. So let's stop talking about the weather and let's talk about the wrap up that I am planning to talk about right now. So I'm doing a mainly May 2024 wrap up of the books that I completed, and also one book that I completed in early June, so I thought I'd slip it in there. Um, it was a pretty good reading month. There was nothing, I think, below 4 stars, and if out of five, so that is a pretty good. It's a pretty good month. No disappointments, I should say. And it started off with a really great book because it was a book that I've been waiting for since I think 2010. It is the sequel to a book from one of my very favorite authors, who is Jasper Fforde. I also got to meet him, I've met him before at different author events. I'm sure he doesn't remember me, but that's fine. Uh, I think the first time I met him was 2006, and that was when he was promoting a second book of two. So this is another second book of two. It's kind of fun. I saw the picture of the first time that we met, and I was about probably close to what his age was at that time. So life is so weird. But anyway, so the first book in this particular group or series or trilogy or whatever it's going to be um, is his was called Shades of Grey, and it's the timing of it was a little weird because then that 50 Shades of Grey came out shortly after, I think, and now people always, if you bring it up, there's always that, oh, you know, and it has nothing to do with that, I don't think at all. So, but it is a completely different world. I guess sort of a dystopian situation where the inhabitants are classed based on what kind of colors they can see. And in terms of real colors, there's ways to put in, I think, fake colors or something. But in terms of real color, everybody can see one particular one uh, well, and or in different percentages. And depending on what color it is and the percentage of how well they can see that color, they are in a certain class. So the highest, I believe, is purple or violet, and the lowest, well, is gray, because that's basically the absence of colors. So the main characters are Eddie Russet. Russet? I think that's his last name. I'm forgetting already. Ah, yes, I wasn't wrong. Eddie Russet, who his strength is being able to see red, and Jane Grey. But well, I don't want to spoil the entire first book, but it turns out that she is also able to see other things, so it changes a little bit. But the point is, the first book left everybody in a cliffhanger situation, but I read it, really enjoyed it, and not forgot about it, but just went on with my life. I wasn't, oh, when are they going to do a sequel? But I thought it would be nice because there were a lot of unresolved bits, questions. And then I heard recently that the sequel was coming out, and I said, well, that's something. And so, of course, I had to get a hold of it, and I did, and I read it as soon as possible. And the sequel is called Red Side Story. So this is it. The spoon, well, you can't really see a spoon very well. There's a rainbow going on here, but you can see them in the back. The spoon is based on the fact that in this particular society, there's like a group of rules, sort of like a holy book, I guess, that allows for certain things, but somehow mistakenly left out certain things, that you can't manufacture spoons. But so everybody has a limited amount of spoons, which I thought was funny. I almost thought about asking him, but I didn't ask any questions this time. Um, I almost wanted to ask him if he had heard of spoon theory, which is somebody with some kind of chronic illness came up with this theory, which is that in terms of energy levels, what you're able to do in tasks every day and how much it takes out of you, you're only given a certain amount of spoons. So, like, say, waking up in the morning, brushing your teeth, getting dressed might take more spoons than someone else, and you don't have as many spoons. So by the time you, say, go to a job and come home, you may have used up all your spoons so that you don't have any more, so that you can't do anything else anymore. You're done. You're tuckered out. But so I wondered if he had heard that and that's why he did this, but I think it's pure coincidence. But that's the wrong Jasper Ford series to talk about. Coincidence. His most in my opinion, well-known series is the Thursday Next one, which apparently there's another one coming out next year. We'll see. I, never hold my breath. But Red Side Story ended up not disappointing, having a few good laughs, having a lot of little almost inside jokes or references that if you know a little bit about pop culture and literature, you'll probably understand it. And I think most people would get it. There are some Star Wars references. And there are obvious Shakespeare references. I say obvious, but I mean, it's called Red Side Story. West Side Story, the musical that came out, well, maybe in the 50s. I don't even know when it came out, or 60s, was based on Romeo and Juliet. So there is a whole recounting of Romeo and Juliet, but based on this color society. And it was kind of funny. It's a little bleak in some ways because it just seems so bizarre. And in this second book, it starts out with Eddie and Jane in some trouble and on trial, about to be on trial for their life. And it's so weird the way the society is. Like, you still have to just go about your day, but then you're going to go on trial. And if you're guilty, you're going to go into this thing called green room, which basically kills you. And that's it. It's so, almost unfeeling. But it progresses beyond that. I don't want to tell you how it happens, but there are bigger issues at stake, and mainly it's because Eddie and Jane and his wife, which is a weird situation. He has a wife, but it's a whole thing, and others start to understand that there is somebody watching them, someone keeping track of them, and some of them are getting killed. I mean, whole towns are getting destroyed for no understandable reason. So they're looking into it, risking their own life, and hilarity ensues. So it's kind of hard to explain without giving away even more than that. But his way of writing has always been hilarious, and not just hilarious, like just one joke a minute. Sometimes it could get a little serious and a little sad. There are some moments that are just genuinely like, ooh, mildly violent, shall I say, but entertaining. And if you have that kind of taste in reading, and if you haven't tried Jasper Ford yet, try either these books or the Nursery Crimes books, which are two books that he never wrote after the second book, and then the Thursday Next books. These are my favorites. There are others, but those are my favorites. So I really enjoyed that. And then I got to a book that I did like, but not as much, and it is and this is something though I would recommend if Jane Austen July is coming soon. And so if you're planning your TBR and you want to throw a mystery novel in, I wouldn't hold back from recommending this one. This is Miss Austen Investigates: The Hapless Milliner, a novel by Jessica Bull. See? And yeah, it's got one of those stately homes, that you see in like Pride and Prejudice when they're poaching, and no, be careful what you say to Lady Catherine and that sort of thing. Although this is based more on Jane Austen's life rather than her fictional character's life, which there are other mystery series based on her fictional characters, which I usually enjoy too. And very nice tea. And I really think that you have to be up for this sort of thing. There were others, and there was one particular, I can't remember the name of the writer, and I feel bad about that because I read a number of her books. There was another Jane Austen Solves Mysteries, mostly murders, series that ended, I believe, last year. It started in her life when she was still living in Bath, so she's a little older than she is in this book, and then it ends like a couple months before she died. So it's over. So I'm kind of glad that someone started over with a mystery series, and this starts earlier, so there's more to cover. I don't know if any of you know the whole story of Jane Austen's life. I'm sure some of you do, because if you watch my channel, you're probably possibly interested in Jane Austen. And if you've seen the movie Becoming Jane, which came out, I don't remember, 2007-ish, maybe earlier, with Anne Hathaway and other people, it talks about her early days when she was writing, but not anywhere near published, and she was interested in a man who was, well, a young man, Lefroy his name was, who was charming and they got along, and who knows how he actually felt about her, but his financial situation wasn't great. He had expectations of good financial situations, but he needed to make a good marriage as well. Anyway, it didn't work out. And it's such a the story of their possible relationship is so close to what Jane Austen writes about, the whole issue between sometimes there's a man and a woman that see each other and might even care about each other, but if there's a financial disparity or a problem, then it might not happen. And that's probably, I don't say that that was Jane Austen trying to write out her feelings, but it might have at least inspired her a little bit, you know? So uh, this book starts out with her wanting to maybe take things further in a chaste way with Tom Lefroy, but she goes to a ball, and shortly afterwards, a woman is found dead, and Jane somehow manages to be one of the people who sees the body, and she identifies her as someone she had done business with. She had purchased, I think, a part. I don't know if it was a bonnet or the lacing of a bonnet, maybe both. And so she already is curious and feeling sad that this person got murdered and who done it. She recognizes that this woman had usually worn a certain piece of jewelry that had gone missing, and Jane gets further involved when her brother Georgie, they call him Georgie in the story, his name is George Austen like her father, um, was found with this piece of jewelry, and he can't explain himself because he's not really discussed too much in Jane Austen's life, because he had some form of illness or condition, and he was living under the care of someone else, not usually with the family, and he was unable to, he wasn't verbal. They used to communicate in sign language of some sort, and so this makes the story, obviously this must never have happened. It would have been covered somehow in history, because even when her aunt was accused of stealing some little bit of lace, I think it was, in Bath, it became a whole trial and scandalous situation. So we would have known about it. But uh, this is for sake of fiction, telling a story. Jane becomes determined, and her family wants to as well, of course, clear his name and of course, but they're a little stressed as to what they could do, and there's so few options. Even being caught stealing could get you in all kinds of problems. Being deported, what's the word? Um, I forgot the word now. Transported, I think it is, to like places like Australia, doing hard labor, or being hanged. You could have capital punishment for stealing, and much less murder, and being put in a mental asylum of some sort wasn't really an improvement. So Jane is determined, and she enlists the help because her sister's away. So she enlists the help of her visiting cousin Eliza, who I just love. She's always one of the most interesting people in the real Jane Austen's life. So I like that she comes through and helps Jane, do the little questions that are hard to do as women, definitely hard to do as a solitary woman, and someone of Eliza's class, kind of class. She was a little more. She was married to a count who died as a result of the French Revolution. However, she still had, just a little bit of a higher place in society, and may have been known to be a little more financially up there, so people might have respected her a little more. So she uses her, and so it's an interesting story. Also, one of her future sisters-in-law helps her out in ways. They're not extremely close. They're not known to be very close, but they still work together a little bit. And I like the story. It was very much in keeping with what I knew of that time. I'm sure they might have played a little bit with certain dates or whatever, and that's fine for the sake of a story. I wasn't entirely in love with it because, and I don't want to give away what happens, but whenever she gets even close to a theory, I don't know if you ever played the game Clue, but when you do, you get these ideas, and I think you have to say you suspect somebody, but if you accuse them and it's wrong, you lose the game. So she just, every time she goes right up, charging up to people and accusing them of things. I know I didn't actually know Jane Austen of real life. We only know from her limited letters that weren't destroyed what kind of person she was. I just seem to think that she wouldn't have been running up to people and pointing fingers. That easily. She might have kept things close to the vest, you know? So that's what really made me not completely love that book. But I also say that otherwise it was entertaining and very uh, enjoyable for someone who likes the life of Jane Austen and likes a mystery. So, and that time period is fascinating. I'm not a fan of Bridgerton for many reasons, but I do find the Regency period, well, this is early, right before the Regency period, but close enough. Interesting. So, speaking of things I find interesting, Freddie. Hi, Freddie. Anyway, as you know, if anything says London on it, I'm pretty excited. If anything says Bookshop on it, I'm pretty excited. So, okay, Freddie, he's excited too. Um, so, okay, Freddie, you want to be on camera? No, he doesn't want to be on camera. But if now I got cat hair all over me. Yes, Freddie. If I find a book called The London Bookshop Affair, I'm probably gonna get it, especially as it is. I like historical fiction, but I don't love a couple of things about historical fiction. One, when the cover has a woman whose back is turned to the reader, but this one, you can see her little of her face. So I'm okay with that. I'm not that big on World War II historical fiction, although I read some of it, especially because it has things to do with London bookshops pretty often. And I'm not really that into the Cold War era. I actually lived during the Cold War era, just at the tail end of it, but my parents definitely grew up under that, and I heard enough about it, and it was important, but it just isn't something I tend to want to read about that often. But this was a dual timeline, which is another thing that I'm not 100% sold on, but it came together pretty well. Basically, there is a whole storyline that happens that has to do with the Nazi era and some English people being part of a spy network, and its ill-fated conclusion, which you find out very early on, so that's not really a spoiler. And then the present day is early 1960s in London, and this main character, Celia, I think her name is Celia. I always forget names, but then I always, yeah, her name is Celia. I wasn't wrong. Twice I wasn't wrong, yes. She is living in South London, and she has a job in a London bookshop in the Strand, and it comes under new ownership, and she's still enjoying things, but she's also trying to forward her way in life. Her parents don't really approve of that, but she's trying to take secretary classes, etc. And she has a really good friend named Daphne who finds out somehow through the office she works in a secret of, pertaining to Celia's family regarding the World War II Nazi time period. And now Celia's life is turned upside down because she never knew any of these things. And now she has to confront her parents. And she has a cat. I believe the cat was orange, but definitely his name is Bartholomew, which I love. And she has a boy next door situation, and she also gets to know an American who's working at the, or was it a Canadian? What did he say? At the American Embassy, which there's a whole story in my family that my dad almost worked at the American Embassy, but something went wrong. But I'm not going to get into that now. And actually, in recent years, the American Embassy moved in London. In very recent years, the location moved. I'm sure you can't wait to learn more about that. And Celia just finds herself in a sort of not only trying to find out this, what is being covered up about her mom. Okay, spoiler. I just said a spoiler. But yes, her mom. You find that out really early. But also, oh goodness, I can't get through one video without giving away a spoiler, can I? Anyway, you didn't hear me. You didn't pay no attention to this person yammering. Anyway, trying to find out information about her, what happened to this person who, anyway, but also trying to find out what is happening. There are things happening at the bookshop and beyond that seem a little shady, and certain people that the new owner knows that she feels is endangering the new owner, and she doesn't know anything about this. And I enjoyed it because it's a good, pretty quick running story that keeps you wanting to know what's going to happen next. Um, I wasn't finding it fascinating, but it was a good, enjoyable, flowing read, if you want to call it that, flowing like the rivers of London. And it also was making me think of a story that I had heard in one of Helene Hamp's books. She's the one who wrote 84 Charing Cross Road, in which she corresponded to a London bookshop worker, and his wife told her a story about someone she knew in the bookshop community who ended up, well, they were friendly, and one day um, the wife of these friends, was wearing a beautiful dress, and so Nora said to this woman, "Wow, you look like a Russian spy." And the woman laughed. And it turned out that they were a spy couple. And I was thinking about that as I was reading this. And then at the end, the historical note, it makes reference to these names that were inspiring this author. And I said, that's the name of that couple. That's the name that was the Helene Hamp, the story, the anecdote. And I said, wow, that's fun. I like making connections like that. But so I'm going to move on without telling any more spoilers. It wasn't a major spoiler. It just, I hate giving things away. Anyways, let's have a cup of tea and keep my mouth shut for a second. Very nice. Last but not least was the one I finished in early June. This is the book I took with me to read when I visited my sister in Chicago. I didn't get to do a video with my sister this time, which was a shame, but I will probably have a small haul video soon. I don't do too many hauls now, so I don't mind doing that. But in the meantime, I had this book to read. I wanted to make sure I had something that I'd be into, so I wouldn't be desperate for another book. And this was good enough. It carried itself very well. And this is one of the British Library crime classics, but it's under the Poison Pen Press, which is the American publishers of this series. And I don't collect these when I find them in bookshops unless I absolutely want to read that title, because they're a different height from the actual British Library crime classics from England, and I hate that. Come on, people. But I still love these books because they bring classic mystery books to life. And this is Death of an Author by E.C.R. Lorac. I don't know if it's Lorac or Lorac. It's a pen name, so either way, right? And you see, this was a library book, so it came out quite recently. So it might be the latest one, at least in the United States. I don't know. It's an interesting story because it says Death of an Author, but it's kind of like, is this author real? There is an author named Vivian Lestrange, writes these books, and in the beginning there's this whole meetup between a publisher and some writers and this Vivian Lestrange, who turns out to be a woman. But then later on, the same woman goes to the police and says, the author that I work for has gone missing and I need you to help me. And I pretended to be him at one time because his name is Vivian, which could go either way. I actually know a Vivian who is a male, so it's possible. And so this leads to Inspector Bond and I forgot the other name. He's actually the Warner of Scotland Yard. They work together to try to find out what happens. There's a body that's found in another part of England, and they think it has something to do with this disappearing author. And it's not just the author, but his housekeeper goes missing too. So there's a bunch of, okay, this woman who went to see the cops, is she keeping anything from them? Is she lying? Is she maybe the author? And what is she doing? And does the body that they find, which is barely recognizable nowadays, it would be a lot easier to identify, but we're talking about, I think, the 1930s. Is it this person? And does it have anything to do with a crime that happened in that area that someone who lives in that area knows a little bit about and helps them out? And it keeps coming up. Can it be this? Can it be that? And these inspectors are just running themselves ragged trying to figure it out. So I'm not going to tell you the ending. The ending, though, was mildly disappointing because I feel like it resolved itself just in a way that I wasn't crazy about. It just didn't feel like closure to me, but that's okay. It still was a very fun mystery in a lot of ways, and I like it because I think the author was playing around too. Because, I mean, the actual author, she was a female writer, and a lot of people in those days, of course, they mentioned Dorothy Sayers in this book at least once, and Agatha Christie obviously is someone that we think about as far as a very successful crime writer. But there was a lot of questions about, okay, this writing seems like it's a man's writing, not a woman's. So how could anyone have thought that this was a woman who wrote? It's a good study on language and if it is gender specific or whatever. So I thought it was a worthy addition, and I want to read more. I do have at least one other book by this author, so I would like to read more of. Well, I want to read more of the crime classics. I have plenty of them to read. And that is it for my wrap up today. I think that was a good variety. It wasn't like stacks of books, but that's okay too. More to ramble on about. So please let me know, blah, blah, blah. Please let me know if you've been reading some good books lately, any good mysteries, any good historical fiction, anything, really. Let me know if you're familiar with these authors, if you read any Jasper Fforde, for instance, etc. Just any thoughts of these books or something you've read. So that's all for today. This is Catherine, taking tea with Catherine and the elusive Janie. Have a wonderful tea and book-filled day.